So, hi, I'm Ashley Downey. I'm an ecological artist, curator, and environmental activist. I'm the founder of Greenhouse Culture, which is a space that combines art and science, a place for green thinking, peer to peer learning, and knowledge sharing. Today, we're starting a new series called Tea Table Talk. A tea in hand. To start the series off, we're collaborating with Greensod Ireland Land Trust to celebrate and mark International Biodiversity Day. And so the first in this series, I'm joined by environmental scientist and bee expert Jeanne Sampier. Hi Jeanne, thank you for joining us.
Hi Ashley, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining. So before we start, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Obviously, it's International Biodiversity Day, so we're going to be talking about biodiversity. But as it's a tea table talk, which is sort of a space for informal conversations, I feel like the most important question is, do you have a cup of tea?
I do. I have my tea. I have a green tea, a peppermint tea this morning.
Peppermint tea, very healthy. I went with the plain breakfast tea today. Fabulous, very healthy. I try to do green tea, but as yet I haven't. Haven't embraced the healthy herbal teas. So as I said, thanks very much for joining me. I'm going to start with when we first met. We actually met a few years ago through Greensod Ireland. And Greensod Ireland, as we know, is a land and biodiversity trust. And I'm wondering, how and why did you get involved with them in the first place?
So I wanted to meet like-minded people in Galway. We all share a common central interest in biodiversity conservation. We're a not-for-profit organisation run by volunteers, and we're always seeking volunteers to bring their skills and experience to the organisation. The main aim then of this organisation would be to address biodiversity loss through education and setting aside protected areas for biodiversity. So we've been gifted a number of sites. And I saw this advertisement for volunteering with Greensod, and I applied, and the role was an education officer. And this really involved developing and implementing the education programs with schools, so to instill in the learners a sense of biodiversity and conservation and respect for all life, and to conserve really the gorgeous biodiversity that we have on our doorsteps. And it's really grown over the years. So we've got new members, new volunteers, new sites, new programs. And it's a very exciting time to be part of Greensod.
And you, I think I remember at the time you actually developed a Be Aware program as well for the primary.
Yes, I did. So I started off working for a more general biodiversity program, and then I actually went back to college to study biodiversity and conservation, and my research project was on bumblebees in urban areas. So I developed a project through Greensod for Greensod to just increase awareness and find ways that we can help bees in our local areas.
Amazing, fantastic. Because actually that's one of the things I remember when we met. I'm allergic to bees, and I was always quite terrified of them. I think a lot of people are, and they, when they see bumblebees, they flap around and get a bit nervous. But through our conversations, I became a lot more aware of them, and actually now I find myself being very curious and trying, like you do, to document them and understand which bee am I seeing. So I really enjoyed our conversations about bees. But I'm aware as well that as well as Greensod, you do a lot of other different things, and you're busy working on many different projects. So I suppose the second question I'd like to ask you is, coming from your own personal perspective, what is biodiversity to you, and how important do you think it is for humans and life on Earth?
So for me, biodiversity is all the species that we share our garden, or in my case, balcony, our neighborhood, our world with. So these would be the invertebrates, the birds, mammals, bats, reptiles, and then you have all of the ecosystems, so the places where these plants and animals live and interact. So we would have woodlands, farmlands, our gardens, mountains, seashore. And then all of the different biodiversity or ecosystem services that they provide, they're indispensable to our health and well-being. So we need food, we need water, we need resources to build and heat our homes. There are natural cures from nature. For example, aspirin originates from the willow trees. So it's kind of that mix of species, the ecosystems, and the ecosystem services that they provide.
So the ecosystem services are really what they provide for us as humans.
Yes, so food. We would get a lot of food from wild areas or managed areas or farms. Really important, to address hunger, and a lot of the fuel then that we would need to heat our homes, and clean water, and again, a lot of medicinal compounds then would come from nature, and still more compounds from fungi, plants, yet to be discovered. So would be good for our species as well.
That one I think is really interesting, that idea that medicine comes from nature, because often we take a tablet and we don't really know, we think it's a chemical compound, but as you say, a lot of the starting point of that is actually from the ecosystems around us.
Yeah, so it's really important then to identify, how the role and benefits of biodiversity, and how we can protect it. And the loss of biodiversity has such a significant human health effect, and negative effect on our wildlife. And so it's really important to identify those, alternative ways of living, and to kind of stop exploiting these declining ecosystem services, which are vulnerable and are predicted to continue declining. For example, in the next 50 years, the demand for food is projected to grow by 70 to 80%. So we'll be putting more pressure on the natural world, and it's really time now to prevent and limit and manage that environmental damage. And on so many different levels, locally, like what we're doing with Green Sod, engaging local communities, and of course thinking globally, thinking of biodiversity loss, climate change, pollution. There are a number of reasons why we are losing our biodiversity. So working towards ecological sustainability to safeguard our ecosystem services is really important, and cross-sectoral policies that promote ecological sustainability is really huge as well.
Yeah. Actually, even on that, going back to the bees, I think it's only recently that it's become a bit more out there that bees aren't just something for example, bees aren't just there to give us honey, that without the bees, actually there's a whole knock-on effect which will affect our food system and the whole chain. So as you said, there's just all these ripple effects, or different areas in which there's a knock-on effect if something gets destroyed or something goes extinct, that I think we haven't been that aware of before.
Yeah, so I suppose we need to continue gathering data on our ecosystems, on our biodiversities, how wildlife populations are doing as our species, the human population increases, how that will affect the other species.
Yeah.
And research, environmental stewardship, education, all of these have a really important role to play in protecting our biodiversity.
Yeah. So Green Sod, I think, is a wonderful charity. I just discovered them a few years ago, and I think once you get to know Green Sod, it's a charity that you want to either be involved in or want to promote. And one of their main aims is to preserve habitats which are vital for biodiversity. And I'm aware, obviously, that you, and indeed many of us, try in many ways to engage in similar actions, like, as you said, to help document, develop, or protect nature in all its diversity. But I'm kind of thinking, what about those who don't really know where to start, or what they can do to help foster health of our natural ecosystems? Would you have any suggestions for those who would like to take action in any way?
I would really encourage everyone to start off by observing. Look at what is on your doorstep, on your balcony, in your garden, on campus. Um, you might want to undertake a biodiversity study or an audit. So you're just going to make note of what wildlife are there already, what species are there, and this will give you a deeper understanding of what's there and how, what it needs. So, for example, during my master's, I spent 2 weeks observing bumblebee populations. The peak month for bees is June, July. So I was following bumblebees around Dublin City parks and just making observations on the types of food plants that they are really attracted to. So my number one species at that time was white clover. So this would come up naturally in your lawn. And I think it's really important to increase clover growth. It's also an excellent nitrogen fixer. It provides nitrogen fixation services in grasslands. So doing an audit, recording what species are in your garden. Do you see bumblebees, honeybees, butterflies? What are the food plants that are attracting them, and really try and protect them. I really believe in encouraging our native wildflowers. It's one of the main reasons why we are losing our pollinators. We have a lot of attractive pollinator plants in garden centres, but I'm leaning more towards the native species. So you could encourage a flowering meadow. So you might wait for the dandelions to come up in spring and then do your first cut around mid-April. Just let the dandelions bloom, really important for bees coming out of hibernation. And then you might cut again at the end of May. And this will encourage the clovers and cuckoo flower, bird's foot trefoil. These come up naturally in your. I had a bee orchid in an urban garden come up in my without cutting it, so leaving it there till the end of May, and then a third cut around mid-July will enhance the growth of the wild. This is if you want to create a wildflower area in your garden. It's about 2 more cuts, so at the end of August, and a final cut then around mid-October. So it's a kind of 6-week meadow, and it's really good for insects, for bees, butterflies, hoverflies, all really important pollinators. And it's not just the wildflowers. You might look at the different trees. So, for example, horse chestnut trees are very attractive to the bees at this time. It's just purely from watching and observing, so you might want to protect those. The bramble, the blackberries will be really important flower for bees later on in the summer, and of course very good for our birds, very good shelter as well for wildlife. It's just something I'm really interested in looking at what we have and just managing that. So just thinking, what's on my doorstep, how can I enhance and protect what's here already.
Lovely. Actually, I think that's a lovely suggestion, that often we think we must go to a garden centre and buy pollinating plants and plant them up. But that idea that actually, if you work with your land, your small little garden, whatever that space is, that over time flowers naturally grow. One of the things, I bought a lot of lavender last year, thinking, oh, lavender, bees love it. But then when I was having conversations with people that were linked with seed savers, they made a very good point as well, that a lot of the plants we buy are chemically produced in some way, or might actually be more harmful to bees because we don't know what they've been planted in. So if you were to buy plants, they should be, where possible, organic seeds. But your idea to leave the lawn and to allow that is a wonderful, wonderful idea. In fact, we have lots of dandelions at the moment. I'm going to go out now after our conversation and see if I can start to spot any of the clover, because I never thought of clover and bees before, actually. Whereas you say that's one of the most important.
Yes, it's really good for around the peak season, June, July. But like I said, you would have different plants for different months. So again, for example, the dandelions, if you can have a strip or a patch or as much of the lawn as you would like for your meadow, just to leave that and then move on to after that, you will have the clovers and the birdsfoot trefoil. Then you might have blackberries, valerian. Ivy is excellent towards the end of the season. So that's another wonderful one for the butterflies and the insects, if you can allow some of that to be in flower in your garden or campus or workspace outside the offices or wherever you can find a place for ivy.
Yeah, actually, our back garden is full of ivy, and again, only through meeting you would I would never have observed bees. Really, I would have run away from them, as I said. And I started to notice these little holes in the ivy leaves, and I couldn't figure them out. They were like a perfect kind of oval. And as an artist now, I was very excited by the patterns these were creating, but it took quite some time observing to realize that it was a bee, and I didn't realize there's these like leaf cutter bees. So again, as you said, that fascinating idea to watch what you have in your own garden and to see what insects and bees are engaging with them, and it's just a world of wonder, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not just the food then, it's also what you're referring to there is the leaf cutter bees. So they're within the family Megachilidae. So they would be collecting materials from the leaves of the ivy to build their nests. So the little half moons would, be walls inside their house, their nest. So a lot of our bees are solitary bees, including the leafcutter bees. About 77 of the 99 species of bee are are solitary bees. Most of us think of the bumblebees. They're the largest, most charismatic, but we have a lot of solitary bees that are also really important pollinators, and it's mostly mining bees that you would see around urban areas. I've seen a good few this year already, including one of the woodland sites that we visited together, the Barna Woods. I saw a chocolate mining bee recently. So it's just very good to see what's out there, and again, what they're feeding on, what they need for their nest site. And another thing is just to promote a little bit more wild area. So the bees like to nest on the ground, for example, the bumblebees maybe at the base of a hedgerow, and just to leave a bit of wild space in your garden or in your office, because they tend to be really drawn to these areas for nest sites.
Yeah, which again is something I only discovered recently. I was told that I never knew that bees nested down low. And actually, I was pulling a lot of debris and ivy and things from our garden. And actually, a bumblebee, I think it was a bumblebee, flew down and kind of rested by where I was. And I don't know, I had a sense that he was trying to tell me, like, please stop pulling at my home. So I actually stopped, because I suddenly realized I haven't observed that area enough to see whether that is where he was nesting. But without having that knowledge that often bees nest low, I would never have been aware to just stop what I was doing and wait and just observe for a little bit longer. Well, I think that's a lovely suggestion, like the idea of wilding, the thought of the thinking of when you mow. One thing I'm definitely going to take from today is that idea of just going out and observing and trying to understand more what is around you in your own local area is lovely. Well, thanks so much, Jeannie, for joining us on International Biodiversity Day. If anyone would like to know more about the wonderful charity Greensod Ireland, or indeed greenhouse culture, we'll provide a link down in the comments below. Jeannie, thanks very much. I hope you enjoy your cup of tea. Cheers.
Bye.